Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 16. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Tuesday was the big day, the March 253, as the Steelers and the rest of the NFL cut their rosters down to that initial 53-man squad. Dave, couple surprises. We know this thing's still fluid, and so this thing can and will change maybe by the time people listen to this, but big day on cut down day and really getting an eye towards the season.
Yeah, it's going to obviously be a busy day on Wednesday. I believe at noon Eastern time is when players are declared that were subject to waivers, clearing waivers. And then as the day progresses, I'm sure we'll get numerous reports of which some players being inked to the practice squad. I kind of wonder if we'll know all 16 of them by later today, but I'm willing to bet we'll know a very good amount of them. It will be interesting to see any post 53 setting moves that might transpire here. I know we're going to talk about a few ideas and maybe a few players maybe the Steelers should look at here, but first and foremost, we got an initial 53-man roster to talk about, and not a lot of surprises overall in there, but there are a couple of names to discuss, right?
There are, especially on defense. To me, offense was pretty chalk, pretty expected. Defensively, there's a couple of names that I don't think I or most others anticipated. So let's just dive right in, Dave, and talk about this roster, position group by position group, to kind of get our thoughts on how things look. And again, we stress the initial roster, and we both think there'll be some changes to it before this team gets ready for week one, and probably a lot sooner, probably over the next 24 hours or so. So let's start here with offense, keeping 24 players overall, including 3 quarterbacks in Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Kyle Allen. Those were always going to be the 3 and in that order.
Yeah, no discussion there. That's what we expected right from the get-go once they reorganized this quarterback room with these 3. Obviously, Plumlee was waived, and now we'll wait and see after he clears waivers if he might be a guy that they sign back to the practice squad.
Running back, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, and Cordero Patterson, like the quarterbacks, the 3 expected names. Warren, it's looking pretty optimistic that he'll play in week 1. Don't want to guarantee that this far out, but I'm optimistic personally. And Patterson will be obviously a starting kick returner.
Yep, those are the 3 we've talked about. Jonathan Ward obviously cut, and P. Ryan, and a couple others that were left on the 91-man roster prior to cut down. So I would imagine probably at least 2 running backs will end up on the practice squad, and I think we know who one of those might be. We'll talk here after a while about, but that went according to what most perceived would happen.
Tight end became less of a battle at the end between Michael Pruitt and Rodney Williams. I think it was pretty clear to all of us. So we both had Pruitt as the 4th tight end on the roster. Don't know when the last time Pittsburgh kept 4 tight ends, but obviously with the Arthur Smith system, we knew they would be tight end heavy. They added depth throughout the offseason by bringing guys in like Pruitt and to compete with Rodney Williams. And ultimately, in the end, Pruitt's blocking ability and availability won out over Williams. So it's Freiermuth, Washington, Hayward, and Pruitt, your 4 tight ends.
Yeah, it became more visible as you got into past, even during training camp. You had talked about Rodney Williams and slow start because of the shoulder issue. He just, he didn't do enough on special teams, and that's where he was going to have to really make his impact, and he was going to have to show some development as a blocker. And the thing about it with Michael Pruitt, it's not flashy, but you know what you're going to get out of him. And he was just consistent. He stayed healthy throughout the whole thing. So no surprises there.
And no true fullback on this roster. We'll see if Jack Coletto, who was waived yesterday, will circle back to the practice squad. So if Pittsburgh needs a fullback for any situation that calls for it, you could see Connor Hayward do it, could potentially see Pruitt, and maybe even the occasional Darnell Washington in the backfield as well. So those are kind of your fullback substitutes when you need them. All right, let's go to wide receiver. This is kind of the first part where we had some question. Would they keep 5? Would they keep 6? Who would they actually end up holding on to? And ultimately, it is 5 in George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, and Scotty Miller. Des Fitzpatrick did not make the initial 53. He has been, I don't know, they termed it a waiver release or what his situation was there. Probably more waiver. But anyway, keeping the 5 there, Miller being that number 5 guy.
Yeah, the 5 core that we talked about there, I had Des Fitzpatrick making it in my 53-man roster prediction, although I would not have bet my house on that. I thought he did some good things on the field offensively. Just even though he was asked to play gunner and do some other work on kickoff, he just was not that top end special teams guy. He's just an okay, we could probably get by with maybe special teams guy. Had he been better on special teams, specifically at gunner, he probably makes it. But the team, and look, there was always the question too about Roman Wilson and his health, and obviously missing most of training camp and obviously all the preseason. Made you kind of wonder if they might keep one more there. Now, obviously, this thing is not done, probably not done yet when it comes to the 53, but I wouldn't call it a shock decision with Des Fitzpatrick, but one that certainly had a lot of people kind of wondering if they would be 5 or 6, and if indeed Des Fitzpatrick would be the 6.
Yeah, I had Fitzpatrick too as that number 6, thinking, okay, at least he got a bunch of reps as a gunner, and he made some positive impact on kick coverage and had that nice big reception in the finale and blocked well, seemed pretty detail-oriented overall. We'll see if he ends up coming back at some point or not. I do wonder, I saw the tweets, and I don't know if you even had one too. I think I saw some of the other guys, media types, have one about, oh, look at this receiver room. It's so poor. What did you expect to do on the 53-man roster, guys? I don't know what the fan base was expecting here. It was that there was not going to be a magical receiver making the initial 53. Obviously, it's not the strongest room. It's one of the probably weaker receiver rooms in football, but I kind of chuckled at the overall reaction from the fan base of, look at these receivers. Like, yeah, we know these are the same guys who have been here throughout training camp. So we'll see if this team adds. We'll talk about some potential outside names to add. The Ayuk situation still obviously looming. But don't be surprised by the initial roster, because these are the guys who are going to make the team.
It feels like it's Brandon Ayuk or bust still, right? And obviously there's been no movement with the whole Ayuk situation post getting into the post cut down and all. And yeah, I mean, even if you would have kept one more in Des Fitzpatrick, that was just merely going to be more special teams than anything. And even at this point, if they don't add somebody like Brandon Ayuk, if they do bring in somebody to add to that room, it will probably be special teams related in nature. So, if you look offensively, the potentially the weakest group, position group on this roster, it's hard to say that it's not wide receivers, because man, what happens right now in this state if you lose a guy like George Pickens for any amount of time? Obviously Roman Wilson missing all the time that he's missed. It's going to take him a little while to catch the moving train. So, not shocked, like I said, once again, even though I did have Fitzpatrick making it, but it's not cataclysmic to say.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, I agree. The room is certainly not strong once you get past Pickens, and Jefferson has looked good this summer, but he's really not my ideal number 2. Besides Ayuk, I don't know who Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about this more a little bit later, but I don't know who Pittsburgh could or would bring in that would jump Jefferson as that number 2, especially knowing this, whoever that outsider would be would have to get up to speed on the playbook and, really kind of earn that role. So I think if you're looking for an outside receiver, it's kind of almost more of a number 3 type guy, which is not going to be incredibly useful in Arthur Smith's tight end heavy system.
As we've said all summer, this team better be able to run the football, right? Better be able to use Freiermuth in the passing game.
Agreed. And you made the point as well. We've talked about it all summer. George Pickens' health is such a critical factor to this team because if he misses a month, this team's in trouble.
I'd pack that guy up in bubble wrap the moment he leaves the practice field every day. I'd get him his own Uber. I'd pay for his Uber to make sure he gets back and forth to work just fine, you know?
Yeah, you and me both. All right, so that's the receiver room for now. Offensive line, the team keeping 9. We both had the correct 9 of Dan Moore Jr., Broderick Jones, Troy Boltonu at tackle, Dylan Cook being put on, I guess what the kids call short-term IR designated to return after the first 4 games of the season. Interior offensive line keeping 6, and Isaac Seumalo, James Daniels, Zach Frazier, your starting guards and starting center. The 3 backups being Spencer Anderson, Mason McCormick, and Ryan McCollum. Congratulations to Ryan McCollum for making the 53 after being on Pittsburgh's practice squad the last 2 years.
As we say at the start of training camp every year, or even before that, these things have a funny way of kind of working themselves out. Their unfortunate situation, obviously, with Nate Herbig, and then you got late into the preseason and Dylan Cook having that foot injury. And the only thing I think we wait to see right now is can this team upgrade the backup center position? But once again, they seem to trust Ryan McCollum. Has been around this team for quite a while. Sometimes it might be better unless you can really upgrade it, which there's not a lot out there from what I've seen. I think there's a couple of veterans floating around out there. It's not impossible, as I like to say, that they might swap McCollum out for somebody that was cut. But at least as far as this initial 53 goes, yeah, there's no surprises here. And if I had to pick one of these guys that would probably likely be inactive for week 1 of the 9, it would probably be Mason McCormick.
And you say that because of Anderson's versatility, and obviously you would expect McCollum to be the immediate backup at center?
Yes.
Okay, me as well. So, yeah, I look at the center list. We'll talk about that later. There aren't a ton of great options out there, so my inclination would be for McCollum to remain as the backup. But we'll see what this team does. So that's the offense. Again, 24 players kept in total. Really no surprises here besides, not even that it's a surprise, but Des Fitzpatrick was kind of the one name we were wondering. Everyone else was basically as expected, I think.
Yes, agreed.
All right, defensively, this is where things get interesting. Pittsburgh going a little heavier here with 26 players kept, including 8. Count them 8. And I had to count a couple times to make sure it was actually 8 defensive linemen making the initial 53. It is Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Dean Lowry, DeMarvin Leal, Isaiah Lattimore, the rookie Logan Lee making it, along with the nose tackles Keanu Ben and Montravius Adams. To me, this is where these surprises began, especially around Logan Lee being that presumably 8th man on.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see if that stays that way until week 1 now. Obviously, if you were to add somebody from the outside at any position at this point, it feels like he might be number 53 at this point. It would have taken a lot of selling to me personally, especially knowing that what I perceived to be the health of this unit coming out of the preseason, would have taken a hell of a sell job to convince me that this team would have kept 8 defensive linemen. Now we had the conversation about DeMarvin Leal and how he's kind of potentially quasi defensive line outside linebacker. Even with that discussion, to keep an extra one on top of it, once again, you would have had to made a very convincing argument, and especially when you would have told me that Logan Lee would have been the number 8th one in that group. I do wonder if this is a temporary spot, though.
Mm-hmm. There's no way this team goes into week one with 8 defensive linemen. 6 is their normal number. 7 they kept last year because they had the talent and the competition to justify it, even though it didn't really work out regular season. 8, there's no way they go into the season with 8, right?
I would have told you there's no way they would have kept 8 to start with, and Logan Lee being the 8. So I don't want to after getting smited that way, I don't want to tell you that there's no way. I've learned over the years not to speak in such affirmative things when it comes to such things. But yeah, I'm with you. It feels like this will be 7 by the time we get to week 1.
The question is, though, if someone gets lopped off, who? I don't think it'll be Leal, especially because they kept 3 edge guys. We'll talk about that in a moment. Could it be Lee? Maybe. That'd be my first stop, but they kept Lee in the first place. So I don't want to be too immediate and say, okay, he's gone. Why do you think he was kept initially? He did not play in the finale. Don't think his play in the preseason or camp was particularly impactful. He kind of got miscast as a nose tackle a lot this summer. What was the reason to keep him?
I don't have a great reason behind it because I didn't think his play was that exceptional. I don't think he's a guy that even had you waived him in the first cut, that you would worry about him being swooped up off of the waiver wire by another team. I don't have a good reason as to why, other than, just being safe and making sure that after teams establish their practice squads and whatnot, maybe, unless there is any fear that he clears waivers, I don't have a good reason why. I really don't.
As far as I'm aware, the group is healthy. I'm not aware of an injury that could be impacting things. And obviously nobody went to IR. So if there is an injury, you wouldn't assume to be serious. Somebody made the comment. I thought it was interesting, and it's obviously all speculation. And I don't want to make this Madden and just, start assuming things, but could they potentially be working on a trade to trade, say, a Loudermilk and for a late day 3 pick, and they'll get the 7 that way, and they're keeping Lee in anticipation of moving somebody?
I suppose that's plausible because, look, if you were to sit here right now and draw up inactives off of just what you have with an initial 53, I don't think I'm going to get much pushback from you. And barring any game day practice squad elevations, I would think that your 5 inactives as things sit right now would be Mason McCormick, Roman Wilson, Kyle Allen as your emergency 3 quarterback, Logan Lee, and Isaiah Loudermilk. So having one extra, maybe Loudermilk is a guy that maybe they have fielded some calls on and didn't want to risk losing, at least without maybe getting some sort of, I don't know, swap a 6 for a 7th,
right.
Those kind of deals. As far as that suggestion goes, I can't call it crazy. I will say it's just plausible.
Same. So we'll wait and see, what moves get made here the next day or two, and kind of go from there.
What does Isaiah Loudermilk offer another team, to be honest with you? Is he a kind of guy that I haven't gone through all the depth charts around the league, at this point right now. Is he a guy that you could at least give a helmet to? I suppose that's plausible.
Yeah, as a base 3-4 end that can play the run, and I thought had a pretty decent summer. Might have caught the attention of some pro scouting departments around the NFL. Obviously the value would be minimal, and if I was a fellow GM, I probably wouldn't be itching to trade for Loudermilk. But if I had an injury or something, it's the thing that makes maybe the most amount of sense to me, because again, I just don't know what Lee. But even if that's true, even if they would have traded Loudermilk, I don't know what Lee has done to really occupy that spot, because Lee would still be inactive at least I would assume, as that 7 defensive lineman.
Right. Lee, even if you were to do something with Loudermilk here, you're probably only going to still dress 6 defensive linemen. So that would leave, and he didn't do enough to get a help. Once again, assuming the health of the team is intact, at that position group, you would think Logan Lee would be inactive.
Yeah, it's not really his fault this summer, but he got put in the middle, because once Fehoko went down at nose tackle, they didn't really have a third string nose tackle. They brought in Marquise Spencer, late in the process, but you put this big 6'5" guy in Lee without length at nose tackle who was getting uprighted. So I don't know. That to me is the number one surprise by far of this initial roster.
Yeah, absolutely it is. I did not have, once again, it would have taken a lot of convincing to get me to keep 8 in total, and then would have taken even more convincing for you to convince me that Lee would be the 8th.
Less convincing at outside linebacker, and Dave, you called this one, keeping only 3 official edge players in TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig. DeMarvin Leal, we assume, will be the de facto number 4 outside linebacker, considering he played quite a bit there this summer, especially in the finale against Detroit. So strong top 3, and Leal as that quasi number 4 that left Kyron Johnson being cut by the team.
Boy, all those conversations that we had from the moment that this team snagged Jeremiah Moon off the waiver wire from Baltimore Ravens late last season on into the summer here. We talk about, hey, this team had Kyron Johnson on the 53, and then we got to a point where halfway through this, it seemed like 2 dogs, 1 bone between Kyron and Jeremiah Moon. Then you get a little bit deeper into the preseason, into that second preseason game, and you had the offset of the snap totals, which now we obviously have a good reason why Jeremiah Moon wasn't healthy. And then you get into the finale, and Jeremiah Moon did not dress for that game. Did not play in that game at all. And then the question became, did Kyron Johnson do enough defensively and on special teams to earn a roster spot? And obviously, with what we saw transpire with DeMarvin Leal and the position flexibility, it ended up being 2 dogs, no bone.
Yeah, they're both hungry.
And Jeremiah Moon obviously going to reserve injured with the designation to return tag. A minor upset that Kyron Johnson, I guess, didn't make the 53, but I think it was debatable knowing what this team was doing with Leal, and then obviously seeing what transpired with Jeremiah Moon. I don't think your mouth hit the floor, did it?
No, Johnson was my 53rd player on the roster, and I struggled with that because I had even told you on the podcast Monday, my initial thought when I sat down to make the team was to go your route and have just 3 true edge guys, and Leal work as that number 4. But I thought Johnson, just from a deserving standpoint, a play standpoint, was one of the best 53 players this year. I thought he had a really good training camp. You see the quickness and the burst as a pass rusher. There is special teams value. I think what it came down to was obviously Leal giving them that flexibility was one component, and this team probably having enough other special teamers where I don't know if Johnson would have been a core starter on multiple units when you had Metakevich and Mark Robinson and Herbig, et cetera. If you kind of map out who would be the starters, you can find ways to not need a Kyron Johnson there. Although I don't, Leal is not going to provide the special teams value that a typical number 4 outside linebacker would. So that's kind of still one element of it overall, but I just thought Johnson was one of the best 53. We'll see if he goes back to the practice squad, but I imagine there could be some interest around the league because I thought Johnson had a really notable preseason performance.
And I think there was a tweet yesterday, right, about probably going to get some interest around the league. It will be interesting if indeed that comes to fruition. However, I'm willing to bet that they have told him, look, if things don't pan out, you're more than welcome to come back to the practice squad.
Right. And I hope he does, but we will see. And Moon being one of the 2 slots for the immediate short-term IR, we had discussed that too. And I thought, I don't think they're going to do that with Moon to use one of those spots because you only get 8 of them in the regular season, but they decided to. And so, could Moon come back mid-season and help out if injuries and the opportunity is there? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah, for now, it's Cook and Jeremiah Moon getting the 2 cut down spots there for reserve injured designated to return.
All right. At inside linebacker, less to discuss here. All expected, keeping 5 and Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson, Tyler Metakevich, and Mark Robinson. So You got your top three will be playing defensive snaps in a rotation. Queen, your every down guy. Roberts probably in base. Wilson in nickel. And then Medikevich and Robinson, your core, probably four-phase special teamers.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine all five of these guys not dressing up for games while healthy, right?
Yeah, I think being upset if somebody was down.
All right.
All right, at corner, and kudos to you, Dave, for calling Darius Rush. I was skeptical if he would make it or not. Not that it was impossible. He was my number 55 player on my quasi roster outside looking in, but keeping 5 and Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, Corey Trice Jr., Darius Rush, and Beanie Bishop Jr. in that slot role, making it over Thomas Graham, who was cut by the team. So we'll see if this becomes the group for week 1. I still think they will add some veteran defensive back. I think they need to, but this is the initial look of the roster.
Yeah, it feels like this is still a fluid position group here overall. We'll have to see how it pans out the next 24, 48 hours there. Look, if I'm Darius Rush, I'm still renting. I'm not buying. Mm-hmm. It was good to see Corey Trice do some of the things that he did during the preseason. Would have liked to seen him attack more in coverage, but strong physical player. I have no issue with him on the 53. I think, and the thing with Beanie Bishop and all, kind of wondered the way Mike Tomlin was talking down, publicly. I struggle with this group, Alex. I really did. I struggled when putting a 53 together, and I think I said that the other day. I would have not bet my house on anything, and safeties included, within this group. It is kind of worrisome overall when you just get past your top 2 of Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson. So we'll have more answers, I think, here in the next 48 hours.
That's a good way to frame it. And even at slot corner, Bishop, I think, could fulfill that rundown role. You wonder who could come on in passing situations. And right now, based on the current construction, I think it'd have to be Deshaun Elliott, who got some looks there in big nickel packages, and even early on in training camp, where maybe then Casey and Trice become your other DBs, and Elliott spins down. So we'll see if they add. They should, but that's where things sit today.
All right.
All right, and then at safety, keeping 5, the last name may be a little unexpected here, but the top 4 were set in stone: Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, DeMonte Casey, and Miles Killebrew. Unfortunately, Ryan Watts going to IR, and that's the out for the season IR. He has not been designated to return, and so obviously suffered what was called believed to be at least a stinger injury in one of literally the final actual play, non-kneel down play of the preseason, and so his rookie season is done. Unfortunate there. But Jalen Elliott making it as that fifth safety certainly would call that probably a mild surprise. I talked about Monday, could he make it? Special teams value, left wing, punt team stuff, what he did against Detroit seemed to be enough to get him over the top. We'll see if he sticks, but that's the fifth safety.
I think we had a little short discussion about that the other day, did we not? About how the plausibility was. And since then, you wrote a very good, informative post on why he probably did. And it's important, and that's what I'll hate the most about if they wipe out these preseason games, Alex, is to pick up on little Easter eggs like that, because I think we even had the conversation: who's going to be that wing on the punt protection team?
Left wing, that darn left wing.
And I if you sit in a room and that's all you're allowed to think about for 48 hours, maybe you would have gotten to that conclusion. But I think it's important to note that at least we did discuss the plausibility of him. And this is a guy that they cut, halfway through camp and brought back, right?
They've yo-yoed him a ton last year, this year, yeah.
But it certainly, in a rear view mirror discussion now, it makes sense of why they went that way with him. And it feels like he's pretty, unless they can find a upgrade to do the same job, it feels like he's at least going to start the season on the 53.
And probably active on game day as
Right.
that left wing, because that's the one thing that was driving me crazy was finding a guy for that spot. The right wing should be Deshaun Elliott because you need a bigger guy. You can't
Special teams don't matter, Alex.
They do. They do. And he had 2 tackles in that Lions game. You're trying to find guys that can make plays, get off of blocks, and get guys on the ground, something this coverage unit and kick and punt struggled mightily with overall in the preseason. So Elliott's tackles were not, they weren't giant, hits for stopping the cover, the return team inside their own 20 on kicks or a punt return for no gain, but they were still tackles in space. And Elliott showed he can do that. Other guys really did not consistently throughout the summer. And that gives Elliott the spot and the work that left wing because you need a bigger guy. It's typically a tight end or a running back or a safety that fills those wing responsibilities. Deshaun Elliott will be the right wing. I'd expect Jalen Elliott to be that left wing. And I think that special teams performance got him that spot. It's crazy, though. Like you said, he got cut in the spring, only brought back because Nate Meters got hurt with a hamstring injury. So you talk about what happens with injuries that open opportunities and doors to emerge again. If it wasn't for Meters pulling a hammy, Elliott probably never comes back and is not on this roster right now.
If I would have known for sure that Watts was going to IR, I probably could have twisted my arm to put Elliott on there.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what happened with Watts. It was called the stinger. I know Tomlin said they were going to continue to evaluate him, so maybe it became more than that. But to be out for the entire season is obviously difficult there for Ryan Watts.
All right.
And by the way, some news coming in. The Dallas Cowboys signing Dalvin Cook. And so Pittsburgh will see Dalvin Cook in week 5.
Is he practice squad or 53 for them?
I believe 53. I'm not seeing the initial reports clarifying either way, but my understanding appears to be the 53-man roster. All right. And then the specialists are pretty status quo, all expected, and kicker Chris Boswell, punter Cameron Johnston, and long snapper Christian Kuntz. And so that is your initial 53-man roster. Some other housekeeping things where Cole Holcomb is going to reserve PUP. Again, Dylan Cook, Jeremiah Moon for the short-term IR, Julius Welshoff and Ryan Watts to the long-term IR. So really unfortunate for Welshoff.
For both of them, that's both. A shame.
Yeah, but Welshoff had a really good summer and was going to be on the practice squad as an exemption to allow them to keep 17. That's just unfortunate there, but he can be still with the team in that building all season. And then Cam Sutton has officially begun the start of his 8-game suspension or 8-week suspension on the reserve suspended list. And so those are the other moves that help get you down to 53 without actually being released.
All right. I'm sorry to disappoint everybody, but I only correctly identified 51 of the 53.
I think I was at 50, not my strongest showing in the world. I missed on Lee, Elliott, and I'm blanking on the other one right now. Rush. Rush was the third one I missed. You missed just Lee and Elliott.
Right.
All right, so your overall just big picture takeaway of this roster, where is it strongest? Where is it weakest? Where could this team look to keep adding?
I mean, I like the running back situation, obviously. I think they're, for what we expect them to do with the tight ends, I'm fine with the tight end / however you're going to use Connor Hayward. I think they're okay there. The offensive line is going to probably have some growing pains at the beginning here. Be interesting to see what they do at the 2 tackle spots to start the season. Hopefully we don't get into a backup center situation with this team. I like what Zach Frazier did, obviously, during the preseason there. The front 7, this is going to be the calling card. This is what's going to be able to keep them in games. Hopefully this unit is good against the run, and Russian coverage go hand in hand, as we've always liked to say there. But I think without a doubt, the strongest really combined group that this team has is its front 7 right now overall, and that obviously includes the inside linebackers and defensive linemen and outside linebackers. That is where that's what's going to help this team win games, I think, Alex, overall. So I am a little bit concerned about the depth at the cornerback position. Be interesting to see how this comes out through the wash in the next week or so. I think from a specialist situation, they're fine. Cameron Johnston, Chris Boswell, and Kuntz just needs to put that ball on the money. We don't need, if we're not talking about Christian Kuntz past this podcast, things are going well, I think, there. Quarterback situation, don't take sacks, don't turn the football over. Running backs, once again, I think that's a fine group. They're going to have to be able to run the football in this offense, and I think that goes without saying there. So that's my takeaways.
Yeah, I'm with you. The front seven is the strength of the team overall. Offensively, I still think this offensive line can be very good, assuming they can get healthy and come together, which I think they're hopefully trending in that direction with Tanu working his way back and Jones getting some rest time. It will be hopefully good for him. The weakness is receivers and corners, and not two areas you want to be super weak in. The depth is just not strong. You got really good number ones in George Pickens, Joey Porter Jr., I guess competent number twos in Dante Jackson, maybe a little less so Van Jefferson. And then behind that, some question marks, some youth and some unknowns. And at receiver, hopefully Roman Wilson can be something. Just don't know much about him getting hurt so early in this process. Trice being a guy that does not have a lot of resume, but it's flashed a little bit too. So they're kind of sitting in a similar position, I would say, Wilson and Corey Trice. And then beyond that, trying to get something else out of there. So see what this team has to add. I think certainly secondary I'd look for. Can they find another, special teamer? Who are their gunners right now? It's Rush and Bishop and Scotty Miller are kind of the names in the mix. So would like some help there as well.
All right, everybody, when they clicked on play on this podcast in the podcast machine, we're probably thinking, man, I hope Dave and Alex spend about 30 minutes on the gunner situation.
That is my dream scenario of every podcast that we do.
Oh, people don't do that?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, a lot of people are probably going to have fall off right now, but we need to have a talk about this gunner situation here. Who, as this roster sits right now, are your two starting gunners, Alex?
As it sits right now, and based on projected inactives, although that wouldn't impact my answer too much, but Darius Rush and Beanie Bishop Jr. are your two gunners.
All right. How would you view that?
Bad. Not confident in that group based on what they've shown here. Now, Bishop didn't get many opportunities. He got gunner work in the opener against Houston and then missed the Bills game and didn't work there against Detroit, probably in part due to wanting to, didn't get the reps throughout the week because it was limited, it sounds like, and then just wanted to get him out there for slot cornerback work in the second half of that game. Rush got a lot of chances. I didn't see anything I really liked out of Rush's play. So it's
he can get downfield. That's about it.
Yeah, finishing the play can be an issue. So I'll put it this way: it's no Boykin-Pierre combination, that's for sure.
What about those two? It's like this is scripted.
I think those are two names. I think Boykin in particular, especially. I mean, if I'm Pittsburgh, Boykin getting released by the Giants, which I think was unexpected to Giants fans. They thought that Boykin would be kept for his own special teams value, and they want him back on the practice squad. But if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm saying Boykin, come back to Pittsburgh right now. You're on the 53. You get paid like it. You're number 5. You're active each day. That should be the first call Omar Khan makes.
How shocked would you be if both Boykin and Pierre both wind up back in Pittsburgh here in the next 48 hours?
I wouldn't say shocked. I think Pierre's a little less likely because you do have. Are you going to bump off? I don't know. He's not a number 3 corner. I'm still looking for a number 3 type corner. If you get Boykin and you can add that with, say, Bishop, I think you can make that work. I just think Boykin fits into this roster a little bit neater than what Pierre does.
All right. Who else out there? The Eagles cut the guy that you had your eyes on.
Yeah, Zach McPherson. There was some report about interest he's drawing. I think he'd be a waiver claim, or at least he was waived, and so he'd be eligible to waivers. And the Steelers weren't listed, but who knows? We'll see. But that is a really strong gunner. Zach McPherson is. He's not really a great corner, but there is some experience in case you absolutely had to play him. So I think Boykin, McPherson are the two names I'm really watching closely in terms of potential gunner options for Pittsburgh.
Do you think in the next 48 hours this team will add at least one gunner?
Man, it's hard to make those predictions. I think they should. I think it'll be a miss.
The thing about Bishop and Rush is they're just really unproven,
Yeah,
and what we've seen so far hasn't been overly impressive. I mean, Bishop had a good rep or two in that first game, and they did not play him in special teams in the final preseason game. So, I mean, you tell me, you watch the practices. I don't know that they spent a lot of time showing you what the gunners will look like.
I mean, they usually skeleton and kind of piece it together, but it's so hard to evaluate because you're not tackling in those sessions. And so you're running down, you're working technique, and you can see how a guy gets off blocks and uses his hands, but you can't see how a guy finishes. In Bishop in that Houston game, he won his first rep and couldn't make the tackle, didn't break down and missed it. So it's hard to really judge in camp how competent a gunner is. The in-stadium stuff is really what matters most. Rush was a really good gunner at South Carolina. That was a calling card for him. He even played there his senior season despite being a starting corner for the Gamecocks. But I just hadn't seen him play well in the preseason, which is all that really matters right now.
All right, so it could go either way. But if they did add from the outside, you would think a gunner might, that plays wide receiver or corner would be part of this, right?
I think ultimately, I think they will bring in somebody. I think they have to. I mean, how often did Mike Tomlin discuss net punting and coverage teams during the preseason consistently? And he said it got better.
Don't do you no good to kick the ball 55 yards down the field if it comes back 20.
Right, give it all back on the return. And Johnson had a terrible net, and his hang time is not his strongest suit. I mean, he's an average to probably slightly below average hang time guy, but has a big leg and is consistent. And so, if you're going to have a punter that can boot the ball 60 yards, you need some really high-end coverage guys. And Pittsburgh does not have that right now. So, I mean, listen, Boykin's a free agent. There's no guarantee he would want to come back as opposed to Pittsburgh. We don't know what those conversations would be like. But if it's a Giants practice squad or a Steelers 53-man roster spot that is going to be active each week, how do you not take Pittsburgh if you're Miles Boykin?
I agree. And both those guys, Pierre and Boykin, signed for, I think, more than the minimum. So that's probably why they went the directions that they went.
Okay. But they did sign more than the minimum? What did Boykin sign for? The Giants?
Pretty sure he did.
I believe you. I mean, I assume it was 1 year. I just never even checked what their contract amounts were. But there were some people asking why Boykin left, and I didn't have a good answer. But financially, that could be one reason.
Trying to see. Maybe it was just he had a total. Maybe it was just a veteran benefit contract for him. I'll have to go back to the Wayback Machine here.
Okay. So anyway, there are free agents right now and available to be signed, and I think a reunion with one, especially Boykin. If you did bring in, let's say you signed a Boykin, who gets cut? Do you cut a receiver? Do you cut Logan Lee? What do you do you think?
Once again, I would think Lee's number 53 right now.
That's my thought as well, or at least something happens where there with the D-line where you're no longer keeping 8 defense linemen, which is way too heavy.
Trying to pull up, see if I can find the Miles Boykin contract. Keep talking.
Yeah, the Giants, people thought he would make it, and they cut all the receivers people thought that might stick. Allen Robinson got cut, former Steeler. I don't have any interest in bringing Allen Robinson back. I think the one receiver, Hodgins, got hurt. I think it was Bryce Ford Wheaton, who's also a gunner, a guy that I had my eye on if Boykin made the 53 in New York, to look at Ford Wheaton, who Pittsburgh showed some interest in when he came out of West Virginia a couple of years back. There's also Ben Skoranek, which has been talked about some. I think our Tyler Wise discussed Skoranek. He got cut by that, deep Houston Texans receiver room. He's a strong teamer. He's got size. He's Boykin-like. I think he went to Notre Dame as well. But he has not played gunner before. He's been a wing or a personal protector, which is not what Pittsburgh really needs right now. So Skoranek still makes some level of sense, but I don't think he makes as much sense as Miles Boykin.
All right, it looks like Miles Boykin, even though it was really kind of a veteran benefit deal, he got well, it still totals out to 167.5, but they split it up differently. They gave him $117,500 signing bonus, and they put in a $20,000 regular season roster bonus had he made it, and then they put in a $30,000 workout bonus with him. So it looks like they just split it up a little bit differently. Maybe the Steelers weren't willing to give him the 167.5 signing bonus. It's hard to believe that they wouldn't have done that knowing his background. So overall, it's hard to say. Maybe they didn't offer him at all, on his way out of town.
I mean, he was still productive, but special teamers do typically turn over. Those guys don't stay in one place usually, unless they're real high-end guys, for too long. There are some exceptions, Killebrew kind of being one in Pittsburgh, but of course he began in Detroit as a key special teamer and then moved on. So that may be the natural progression of it all, perhaps. But yeah, I think bottom line is Boykin's a plug-and-play gunner, one of the better in football. To me, if he's willing to come back, that's a no-brainer. So I'm Omar Khan.
You'd have to think wherever he lands, it's just going to be a veteran benefit contract with no signing bonus at this point.
Yeah, that's what it should be. He's not going to cost more than that.
All right, and what else? Any other gunners that you got? Let's talk about potential ads, I guess, now at this point.
Yeah, I wrote an article that's up this morning, and some of this may become outdated here sooner than later because guys will probably start signing here, getting claimed here pretty quickly. About 13, a baker's dozen names of post-cut down additions Pittsburgh could make that make some sense that the team could have interest in. Mention Boykin and Skoranek at receiver, really for their special teams value. There's Terrace Marshall from Carolina as an actual wide receiver. He's 24. He's got some size, didn't work out in Carolina. If you wanted to look for more actual wide receiver help, Marshall's one name that's still pretty young. You can try to build back up.
All right. Anybody else on that list?
Yeah, I'll just kind of mention through the centers. If you wanted to look at backup center, and I'm with you, I think the most likely thing is to stick with McCollum. There are a couple of other more veteran centers with more experience out there, and Sam Mustipher, who started in Chicago for a couple of years, was in Baltimore last year. Will Clapp, who was in Buffalo, he can play center, he can play guard. He's in concussion protocol. At least he was in Buffalo. So there's one potential health obstacle. And then Matt Hennessy, who I mentioned, I think in the offseason, he was with Arthur Smith in Atlanta. He played with the Eagles this year. He got hurt some and missed some time, but was healthy this summer. That could be one name, but I think ultimately it makes most amount of sense to stick with Ryan McCollum. I think corner is the one name where I really kind of dug into to find some slot options, some outside options. Just kind of rattle off the list of names here. Mentioned McPherson from Philadelphia as a gunner type. Duke Shelley can play maybe inside, outside, probably better as a nickel. He was with Minnesota. He's versatile. Nashawn Wright fits that Porter Trice build of that big, long corner. He was in Dallas. He's not played a ton of football, but has more experience than Trice and Rush. And he's got some gunner work as well. So that's one name that I would look at. How about Rock Ya-Sin, former Colt and I think Raider. He was in Baltimore last year, played against Pittsburgh in the finale. I think Pittsburgh had interest in him coming out of Temple in 2019 before they moved up for Devin Bush. I think Nick Needham makes a ton of sense here as a nickel guy. He had a really good summer with the Dolphins. I think Dolphins fans were upset to see him go. That's a guy that makes a lot of sense if they want a nickel help there. And then some other smaller name guys, Kamon Hall, he was with the Cowboys. He got signed late summer, had a really good preseason. He's a really under the radar type of name, but that's someone that may be more practice squad than 53, but a name that I thought had a good summer. And then you mentioned Ugo Amadi, who Pittsburgh brought in 2019, can play safety, play slot corner, and not played a ton of football last year, but there's some versatility with Amadi.
What specifically about some maybe needle movers at wide receiver not named Brandon Ayuk?
In terms of needle movers, it's hard to really find that guy. I mean, Tim Patrick signed with Detroit, and I was not crazy about the idea of bringing in Tim Patrick anyway with all the injuries that he suffered. I mean, I mentioned Marshall at wide receiver. Could you trade for a John Mechie or something like that? That's possible. I'm just not. I'm struggling to find that guy that can come in and have an offensive impact on a consistent basis.
And everybody was up in arms about the Texans wide receiver, right?
Yeah, like I said, John Mechie, you could look at
the other one that they cut.
Noah Brown.
Yeah, the thing is with him though is he missed the entire preseason with a shoulder issue, and he's coming off of a torn labrum in January on top of it. So, and I don't think he kind of guy you're going to roll out there immediately on special teams either.
Yeah, is he even healthy right now? Did he do anything this summer? I mean, he didn't play.
I know he returned to practice late, but that was it. He did not suit up for any of their and they had the extra preseason game this year as well too. And he did not suit up for any of the preseason games.
Yeah, so it's a question of, is he healthy enough to even play right now in a game? It's not sounding great that he would be by week 1, by week 2. So yeah, I was not as enthralled with Noah Brown as I think some others were. And I think you're with me on that one.
Yeah. It just, I mean, unless you trade for somebody at this point, and even some of the ones that we've talked about with Burks and Mechie and who else, lower level guys. What about Pierce?
Yeah, I'd love to get Alec Pierce, but I think the Colts are going to hang on to him, especially once Josh Downs got hurt with an ankle sprain midsummer. I know Mitchell is there, but Mitchell's played more slot to kind of compensate. I'm guessing the Colts do not have a desire to trade away Alec Pierce right now.
Agreed. All right. That's a good list, though. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of those names will get added. Obviously, they're all dart throws, but they all make some level of sense. And I think Pittsburgh could at least have interest at addressing those positions more big picture. And by the way, to answer your question from earlier, Dalvin Cook is signing with the Cowboys practice squad initially, and then he could be called up, which is pretty common with veterans to do practice squad and then eventually get elevated or signed off the practice squad to the 53. So I still would expect to see Dalvin Cook in week 5.
All right.
All right, Dave, let's talk about some cash spending, your favorite topic.
Well, wait a minute. We've got at least one guy that's supposedly going to be signed to the practice squad, right?
Right. We should. Yeah, I should mention that. I'm sure people will know more by the time this episode comes out or later on in the day on Wednesday. But Boston Scott reportedly signing to the Steelers practice squad. He was with the Rams this summer, most known for being a Philadelphia Eagle. And call that guy up in week 8 against the Giants, because Scott is the Giants killer for sure.
All right. And once again, we probably expect a couple of running backs on this practice squad. It goes without saying, I think it's pretty safe to say at this point, especially with Boston Scott already being out there, that all 16 guys on the practice squad won't be guys that were just recently waived or cut.
Agreed. There should be some outsiders, I think, especially offensive line, maybe a corner. Going to see some outsiders brought in. I think Jonathan Ward, though, would make the other running back practice squad spot. I think he was healthy. He dressed for that Texans game. I saw him on the bench. He did, the Texans game. Or the Lions game. Getting all mixed up here. He dressed for the finale. He did not play, but if he's healthy enough to dress, he's got to be probably healthy by week 1. So I think Ward and Scott might be your 2 practice squad running backs.
All right. And surely we'll have some names filter in throughout the afternoon as far as the practice squad goes. I would think by maybe Friday, at least we'll have the full list, right?
Yeah, sometimes Pittsburgh and teams won't have the full 16 initially. They may sign 12 or 14 players. This team is off after they practice today through the weekend, so there is no great urgency to fill up the entire practice squad until really next Monday, Tuesday. We have a tracker on SteelersDepot.com that is having an updated list with the names to get reported.
Agreed. All right.
All right. If gunners are my favorite topic, your favorite topic is cash spending. And I think you have some updated news on where Pittsburgh stands in the cash spending world of 2024.
Yeah, at least where things sit right now, this team looks to be kind of on pace with what they have on IR and with what they have on the 53 and everything all inclusive, and even talking about $4 million going towards a practice squad. Looks like right around $206 million thereabouts. And even after over the cap looks like has accounted for all the initial cuts and moves and all like that, the Steelers are in last. 32nd overall in projected 2024 cash spending right now. Now, that should change. How much more cash this team will spend, it depends on two things. Do they go out and trade for a more expensive player i.e. Ayuk or something that would obviously end up in a high dollar additional cash spend? And then we're sitting here and waiting in these final days to see what kind of contract extensions this team does. Pat Freiermuth obviously leading the list in guys that we expect to happen to. That would probably be an additional $13 or $14 million spent there. Even if they get Cameron Hayward done on an extension, you do have to wonder about how much more additional cash over the $16 million he's already on the books for in 2024 that will be. I can't imagine if they do throw additional cash Cameron Hayward's way for 2024, it will be much more than the $16 million that's already out there. And then people don't like me talking about it, but I still think it's plausible that you see something happen with Najee Harris, and that would obviously be an additional cash spend. That's it. That's the list, I think, as far as possible extensions go. Now, it does not feel like this team will have to restructure the contract of Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's out there if they need to, but at this point in time, it doesn't feel like it'll be necessary. I want to caution that feeling. Me saying that it feels like it is not a guarantee. It just, from where I sit, it doesn't feel like. But even if they do that, that would not be an additional cash spend, because all you're doing is moving around money, turning a bunch of his base salary into a signing bonus, if you will, there. So way back in March or whatever it was, Alex, I projected that this team would get to around a $235 million cash spend. Well, taking my shoes off and subtracting $206 million from $235 million, let's even lower it down by $5 million to $230 million. That's a $24 million gap in what I thought this team would spend in cash. They will. I'm still convinced they will spend more cash. It's just a question of how much more at this point. And it's not. Look, the Steelers are very cautious with their cash spending on a year-to-year basis anyway. And obviously, there's rules in place that say after a 3-year span in the CBA, which this year is the first year, that teams need to spend at least 90% of the total 3-year cap number in cash. They don't have to do it every year. They can have years where they go 80% or whatnot. It will be something that's talked about as the season goes on. If this team is not winning ball games, it will be easy to look at, look at their cash spending.
Yeah, which would just to say that this team has not invested enough to upgrade its roster to its maximum potential would kind of be the overall takeaway. And yeah, this team could do those extensions, and they're still more likely to happen than not, at least in the case of somebody like Freiermuth. But the clock is ticking. We are getting pretty close to the start of the season, which is the team's self-imposed deadline. So there's still time, obviously. We've seen these deals happen very late before, but the clock is starting to become a factor.
Right. And look, I mean, as far as cap space goes, this team still, here's another thing, is that the rule of 51 for the offseason does not end until next Thursday. Okay. So
the start of the actual kickoff of the first game of the season.
Right. So as far as cap purposes go, this team has even more, right around $18, $19 million right now because the rule of 51 is not ended. And remember, you still have a practice squad to go. You still have the 52nd and 53rd roster spot to go. You still have guys that are not in the top 53 that will be on IR that will eventually count. But as far as in the now, this team still has plenty of cap space to work with at this point in time. So once again, there's news coming. This team's going to spend more cash. It's just a matter of how much and when in the next between now and Thursday, a week from Thursday.
Do you think they'll still hit that $24 or $29 million additional cash spend by September 8th?
They could.
You expect it because you were more confident sounding at the start of
all I'll tell you is the math out from a math perspective, mathematically speaking. It makes all the sense, assuming they don't go out and trade for Ayuk, right?
Mm-hmm.
To spend an extra 14 or so million on Freiermuth and another 10 or so million on Najee Harris.
All right, we will see. Do you assume that the reason why some of these, extensions with Freiermuth have been delayed is because of Ayuk, and they've been in this holding pattern, wanting to see what exactly goes down there?
I think a lot of it might revolve around how much they want to move around on when and if they do Cam Hayward. How much of that 16 million do we want to turn into a signing bonus?
Okay. Would that also hold up Freiermuth's end? I mean, because his deal, it's probably already pretty figured out at this point.
Well, his cap number is still going to increase, so that's part of the piece of the puzzle here. And especially if, and it's a big if, they're trying to avoid doing anything with Minka's contract.
Okay. But I mean, do you think just because the uncertainty with Ayuk is just providing kind of an obstacle to this team not knowing its full financial picture until there's clarity on?
Yeah, I think there's several things in play here. I think the whole Ayuk thing. I think how much of the money they want to turn of Cam Hayward's base salary into a signing bonus is playing into this. For all we know, maybe hard negotiations are still going on with Freiermuth and perhaps even Najee Harris at this point too. So, and maybe even Cam Hayward, at this point. There's so much unknown, behind closed doors that we like to think that we know that we just don't know.
Sure.
But I don't think it's just one particular thing. Let's put it to you that way. I think it's layered here. But the good point is once again, the rule of 51 does not end for more than a week. And once this team gets through practice on today, Wednesday, they don't practice again until Monday. So maybe you want to make sure everybody makes it out healthy and all like that. And there's no rush to do it, really. You've waited this long. Why not wait until after you get through practice? News is coming, Alex.
And you said this team technically still has enough cap space to trade for Ayuk today and initially assume his, fifth year option at last year of his contract before an extension would take place?
Technically, yes, because of the rule of 51 still being in play at this point. And that even means that once you sign these practice squad guys, let's say you filled up the entire practice squad this afternoon, all those salaries would be outside of the rule of 51. So they would not count technically until the rule of 51 Thursday goes away a week from Thursday. So technically speaking, cap-wise, this team could still trade for Ayuk in the present.
Gotcha. Good to know. All right, Dave. Anything else here to discuss? I know we got waiver claims that'll be processed here, top of the hour, noon, our time. Any other just thoughts about yesterday's cut down activities?
No, I'm just disappointed I didn't spend more time on the Jalen Elliott thing. I'm really disappointed in myself in that. And, we didn't know what was going to happen with with Watts.
Sure.
So that's kind of hard to predict there. But I'm proud of the work that we put in this offseason, not being in the building.
Yeah, I think we painted a good picture, and I think we nailed offensively what was going to happen. I mean, we both had Fitzpatrick, but we both knew he was not a guarantee or a lock. And otherwise, I think we were pretty perfect there. So one other just brief note, very small, very nerdy, but Pittsburgh hiring 2 front office interns, a football analytics intern and a scouting intern to round out the front office heading into the season. So you do have 3 men now on staff with the analytics in their title, which is kind of a departure to an extent from the Kevin Colbert era. So no shock, been documented and discussed before, but Omar Khan embracing analytics more than what Kevin Colbert did, it seems.
Alex, I think we just had the perfect podcast for me and you. We were able to talk
Yes.
about special teams. We were able to talk about cash in the cap. We were able to talk about lower level front office moves behind the scenes. What else was bonus? We ought to charge for this episode, I think.
Perfect episode, no notes.
What else did we talk about here that was kind of out of the norm?
Potential free agents team could bring in. We love looking at the waiver wire and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a show just for us, no one else.
Right.
Hopefully you enjoyed listening to us all the same.
Right. Yeah, that might have been the perfect show as far as you and I are concerned here. No, I think we hit everything here, and I think we did it in about an hour. So with that, shall we transition to the email machine real quick?
Yep. Let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
We also mentioned Brandon Ayuk.
Yes.
That's on the bingo card. Man, it really has been a perfect show here. Talking about contract extensions on top of it. All right. Paul Brown writes in, Dave and Alex, I know at this point, not only Steeler Nation, but the NFL community just wants the Ayuk situation to be over. We hear you, Paul. With that said, Ayuk completely missed the preseason and potential training camp with a new team. Is there a point where the asking price goes down because so much time has been lost? I suppose that's possible, Paul, but there's also how bad do you want him aspect of it. And if the asking price needs to stay what maybe it originally was to land a guy like him, even though he has missed time, and I think week 1, at least his full playing time would be in jeopardy at this point. I'm not sure how much the price tag moves, even, you don't know for sure if you're bidding against yourself in this situation either. So, I mean, it's a hard, just speculation on my part. But, I mean, I think it all depends. How bad do you want the player, assuming that you can still deal for him?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much more to say about that situation, I don't think, right now. His concern was about the readiness to start the year.
I think a little bit just playing into the whole compensation offer aspect of it.
Yeah, and we discussed this. I don't think there'll be really an impact to that. But right now, it's been quiet for the last week in terms of news. Every report that comes out is basically, there's no update. I mean, that's the gist of every reporter that's talking right now. So how this thing gets resolved, when it gets resolved, what that looks like, I have no idea.
Right. Agreed. All right. Dustin Stover writes in, hey, Dave and Alex, please take Broderick Jones' recent struggles out of consideration for the purpose of this conversation. Going back to when Fautano was first drafted, it seems like the goal for him was always to play right tackle and Broderick at left. Yet going back to college, Fautano was always a left tackle. He had far more overall college experience, especially playing left tackle than Broderick. Broderick has played a majority of his pro snaps at right tackle. Wouldn't logic say just to keep him there, let Fautano played left tackle, or is this possibly because Fautano played with Penix at Washington and he was a left-handed quarterback and the Steelers feel Broderick is better in pass protection? Is he actually, he asked. Seems like there is an ever-growing trend of playing linemen out of their natural positions. I understand the Steelers, as do all NFL teams, covet versatility, but I'm worried this this trend has stunted the future growth and development of our offensive line. Do players actually have a say in where they feel most comfortable playing, and is it ever taken into consideration? Please help me understand logic around all this and why this is a good thing. He says he's been following the site, listening to the podcast for at least the past 10 to 15 years. No one does it better. Keep up the great work. Thanks for the kind words, and as long as you've been listening, Dustin. Take it away, Alex.
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. When they first drafted Fautanu, we had the discussion, would he be left side, right side, when the team initially just said right after the draft, like, we have not determined that. We're not worried about left, right yet. And
I kind of wondered if he'd be more conceived as a guard too, to be honest with you.
Okay. Yeah.
Through the draft process. I kind of wondered if several teams might take him off the board from a tackle perspective, thinking that maybe he'd be better fit as a guard.
And I think some did. But my initial response was, yeah, maybe Jones stays a right tackle for all the reasons Dustin mentioned. He's already there. Fautanu's a left tackle. So either way, you're playing a college left tackle at right tackle. So instead of starting the process anew with Fautanu, just keep Jones at right tackle since he's already started, as Dustin said, half a season on that side. Obviously, that did not take place. But so I get the inclination. I don't think the Penix blindside left-handed quarterback has anything to do with what side they wanted to play either guy. I think that's totally irrelevant in the discussion. In terms of how much say does a player get, I don't know. What I can surmise and kind of assume is that, as Mike Tomlin likes to kind of joke about, there are guys who can have opinions and there are guys who can make decisions. The player can have an opinion about which side he would like to play on. The team makes a decision on where that guy ultimately plays. So I think that's how things unfold. Yeah, there is a trend about, linemen being moved out of position. And that's, I think, pretty common in this year's draft. Joe Alt, for example, left tackle at Notre Dame. He's going to right tackle. But that makes more sense because you have a bona fide stud in Rashawn Slater at left tackle. You're not going to move that guy off his spot there. Wasn't the case in Pittsburgh. So yeah, I mean, I think it can, hurt and stunt growth and development. That is a concern. I've been concerned and frustrated by how Jones has been used. And yeah, I mean, I hear you on that one.
Where do you think Kevin Dotson thought he should play?
Yeah, right guard, obviously.
Where did we say Kevin Dotson should play?
Oh, I'll admit that I didn't buy it as much initially. And then obviously when you see Dotson flourish and him talk about it, your mind changes there. But yeah, point well taken. And it's not just for linemen. Think about a Sean Davis and how he got moved around and how that probably impacted him. To Marvin Leal, how he's been moved around, how much is that impact and kind of slow development there. So yeah, I mean, it's a fair critique and concern.
All right. We got this one from Homeless Greg the other day, right? About the dude, where's my slot? I think we covered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got that. So let me just double check through here. All right, I think we're up to date on the email machine there. So I think we can wind this down. And once again, waivers come to an end at the top of the hour, which it is 11:21 Eastern time right now. So about 39 minutes is when the waiver process comes to an end. So that's when we should start hearing more about practice squad moves. Alex has a practice squad tracker on SteelersDepot.com. Obviously, we'll be keeping our eye out for any other news and have some post up on the site. Anything you'd like to add on this perfect podcast for Wednesday, August the 28th, Alex?
Danny Smith. I don't know if we actually said Danny Smith's name, but to mention just have his name to really put a cherry on top of this show. Want to get that in there as well.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. Alex and I will be back on Friday talking about whatever else has happened with this roster and practice squad and any other breaking news that might come about. So in the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.